Hello. Welcome everybody to Startup Turkey and to our panel. We'll be trying to keep an interesting discussion on investors' view on the Turkish internet market. I'm Özgür Altan. I'll try to moderate this panel and keep it flowing for you to get the maximum benefit. My background is from private equity in London and Luxembourg. I've been recently with European Investment Fund investing around Europe in funds as well as managing a Turkish investment program briefly in 2010 and 2011 called IVCI, Istanbul Venture Capital Initiative, which invested in 8 Turkish funds. And now I'm in the due process of formation of a VC fund, and here we have a very selective group of investors, local and international. Some of them are both. So I would like to pass the discussion on to our esteemed panel guests. Maybe we can do just by taking turns. I can introduce them each as we go. And the first question is, I think, obvious. Their general views on the Turkish internet market. So maybe I can introduce you with Mr. Cem Soysal from Inventram. Inventram, probably everybody knows here. It's established in 2010 as a partnership between Koç Holding and Koç University. And their focus is to commercialize early-stage innovative technology inventions. And maybe Mr. Soysal can enlighten us on these issues.
All right, thank you. For the introduction, nice introduction. And yes, I'm Cem, and I have been in the internet industry for the last 17 years, I guess. So I'm just, that's when the Turkish internet really started. So I'm pretty much older than most of the guys over here. And I've been in the ICT industry for the last 23 years. I have 2 degrees, one civil engineering, one computer engineering. And what we have been doing at Inventram is, it's an early stage technology innovation, investment company. Part of Koç Group, which is the largest group of Turkey with a closing, last year closing $46 billion. And I guess 220th largest among the Fortune 500. So it is sort of the extension of a vision of Koç Group, who is really investing into research and development a lot, who is really investing into technology a lot. So it's an extension of that culture. Going back to the internet, actually, I have witnessed really the 9.6 kilobits per second modems during the 95s, 96s. Now today you are talking about 16 megabits per megabits. We were talking about kilobits per second access rates those days. And it was the days of internet when 700,000 subscribers are the total. What was the total population of Turkey, actually, internet population of Turkey? And with Burak, who is the main cause of us being here, at home CEO, we were working together at Vestel Group, one of the largest consumer groups of Turkey. We started an internet company and created some campaigns, added like fresh 280,000 subscribers into the internet market. It was a 30%. It was a 30% growth for the whole market. So it was that small. Today we are talking about 39 million internet users in Turkey, and so on and so forth. So we have come a long way since then. In 90s, actually, I mean, you all know that www started in 1990. It's very recent. And it's Tim Berners-Lee, a guy called at Next Computer. He started this hypertext thing, videos and images and everything. Then in 2000 came the Web 2.0. I mean, we are talking about virtual communities. We are talking about user-generated content. So it's growing like hell. Now today it's a lifestyle. I mean, just there's not much to talk about it. It's really user-generated. It's really social media. It's e-commerce everywhere. We are talking about mobile right now. So I guess we will get into those subjects later. So I don't want to consume the times of the other guys.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Turn on the mic.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Soysal, and I think it's a good brief introduction to what happened in Turkey and also generally in the internet. Now we will move on to Rupesh Shatwani. He's with EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. He's within a new group formed in 2012, a VC team within EBRD. EBRD is an established investor of private equity funds. We have, when I was at EIF, invested in many funds together with EBRD. They are actually the largest private equity investor within their countries of operation, which is 29 countries plus 4 countries, 33, which includes Russia, Central Asia, Eastern Europe, and Turkey. And they have invested over 3 billion euros in about 140 funds. I think about 80, 90 of them are still active investments. But only 2 of them, as I just learned, are VC funds. But now they have a new team to focus on VC investments. They made 1 investment already in Russia, and they are looking for new investments in the region, including Turkey. And I will pass the word to Rupesh for his view and on the Turkish internet market, also maybe more specifics.
Sorry, we're all sharing a mic here. So thanks for the introduction. Just in summary, again, we're managing a 100 million euro capital fund focused on early and growth stage technology companies in Central Europe, Russia, Turkey, and Middle East, North Africa. We've done 1 investment so far in Russia, which is in Kupi VIP, which is a flash sales commerce business, doing quite well. But we're very keen to invest here in Turkey. Why Turkey, you might say? So, if we look at all the markets that we are active in, from an internet point of view, probably only Russia and Turkey are interesting enough because you can build a scalable business. If you look at the metrics, if you look at fantastic. If you look at the metrics of Turkey, and I don't want to overwhelm you or bore you with numbers because I'm sure you all know them. Very high internet penetration, very high mobile phone penetration, very high credit card penetration, great logistics infrastructure, young demographic, rapidly growing economy. I mean, these are all the things that from a macro level are very, very interesting for investors, and why we believe the internet story here is still untapped. I think the latest numbers I saw was something like only between 6 and 9 million people in Turkey have actually made a purchase online, which is a tiny percentage of the country's population, as well as a tiny percentage of the internet population. If that goes anywhere near to what we see in Western Europe, 60%, those kinds of numbers, you can imagine how big this market will become. I'm sure there's guys who have even more detailed numbers than me, so I won't try to overwhelm you, but we think it's exciting. We think there's a lot of gaps still that need to be addressed. There are challenges, of course, and I think we'll get to them. But we're very excited to see what teams are here today also and tomorrow over the next week, couple of days, and see whether we can find new opportunities. And hopefully we'll announce some stuff soon.
Yes, hopefully, and thank you very much for the brief overview of the Turkish internet market. I think in our following round of questions we will get into maybe more specifics of how do you see the Turkish internet market in terms of opportunities or valuations, future. But I do agree in terms of the demographics and the gap between some other countries maybe you're more familiar with and where Turkey could go. And maybe Yüksel can help us understand more about the Turkish market, because with iLab Ventures he's been investing for about 10 years now in the Turkish internet market, and they have, please correct me if I'm wrong, over 10 investments. One of them made last year, but they've been investing since 2003. iLab Ventures being established, he's been investing in 2003 with iLab Ventures. iLab Ventures established in 2000 by Mustafa Say. And there are some big names in the portfolio like Kariyer.net, Gitti Gidiyor, as everybody would know. Now I'll pass the microphone literally to Yüksel.
Pleasure being here.
Now it works this time.
So it's a pleasure being here. As Özgür has pointed out, iLab has been investing in Turkish internet assets since early 2000. We have slightly over 10 internet assets in our portfolio. We're rather stage agnostic, meaning we invest anywhere between a couple of $100,000 to up to $10+ million in early, late, and late stage investment opportunities focusing in Turkish internets. And if you look to the Turkish internet landscape, what I have really observed is that we are pretty much very clone-friendly country, meaning what has ever worked in other developed market is working in Turkey with very little or no customization at all. So this is something that really excites us and shows us that the Turkish people have the potential to embrace and adapt successful business models that work elsewhere else, and that they are very aggressively adapting new technologies and businesses that make them easier, make their life easier. And Rupesh, thank you. You have already summarized all the figures, have not left anything else for us to say, but what else can be added is that at the same time, Turkish people are getting wealthier and learning to spend money not only in the internet space, but also on the brick and mortar side of the business world as well. So it's economy booming both in terms of demographics and also from an economic standpoint. We have a population and country that is getting richer and richer and learns how to spend and gets opportunity to spend. So I think that's an extra boost for the internet landscape. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Yüksel, for that brief intro and views. Hopefully we will get into more details about your specific views on the internet market in the next round. And Turkey, in terms of just maybe to add to that, has the right demographics and is probably on the right path. I think in 2011 we were the 12th largest internet, I wouldn't say audience, but in terms of presence, in terms of visits and FaceTime. And maybe in the 2023, maybe we will not be one of the top 10 economies in the world, but it looks like we will be one of the top 10 countries in terms of internet presence and how we use internet and utilize internet when you look at where the demographics is going. And now, in that sense, I would like to pass the word to Nico, who's with General Catalyst, a veteran venture capital fund established in 2001 in the US, based in Massachusetts and California. And they have a lot of investments experience in this space, and they have 2.2 billion raised in 6 funds since then, investing in this space globally. And they have taken an interest in Turkey and Turkish internet market. Please, Nico.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for the introduction and for inviting me here. We're an early stage VC firm, 2.3 billion under management across, can you hear me now? I think so, yeah. So thank you for the introduction and for the invitation. I'm honored to be here with a group of tons of entrepreneurs, startup enthusiasts, investors, and ecosystem builders here in Turkey. I'm originally from Greece, so I'm in particularly excited to be here and see that you guys are at least 10 years ahead of us in terms of startups. We only got started in that regard in Greece 5 years ago. So General Catalyst, the firm that I'm a principal at, is an early stage VC firm with offices in Boston, New York, and Palo Alto. We're a group of entrepreneurs investing in entrepreneurs, and it's one of the fastest growing VC firms in the history of the industry. IT investing is what we do, consumer, enterprise, a lot of experience in e-commerce, travel, software as a service, business applications, mobile, new media. It's a broad body of work. About 90% of the portfolio is based in the US and 10% overseas. So Turkey is very, very interesting because many, of the long-term metrics, seem highly promising. But also, if you look into, some of the behaviors that Turkish people have, they very much emulate online, at least, the behaviors of American people or Brazilians. It seems that you're very, very big into social media content consumption and creation. I'm always, kind of surprised at times, like, how much time people in Turkey have to create and consume all this content. It feels a little bit, you guys soon, will be running out of time to continue to consume and create all this content. So I've seen a lot of companies coming out of Turkey in e-commerce, in particular gaming, and it's clearly a big enough market to create some local champions that some of the Silicon Valley-based tech companies have a strong interest in acquiring and creating a bigger conglomerate. But also, what is particularly, interesting for me as the next, years come by and this fantastic ecosystem continues to compound is that Turkey needs to have its own country company, defining moment. So if you look into other countries, we've seen Finland, they have Rovio. We've seen Sweden, they have companies like Spotify or Skype. What is that, company coming out of Turkey that everybody in the world, when they think about, Turkey and the startup ecosystem, will kind of associate, the country with? And I think now that you guys, are here and you've been building companies for 10 plus years, this is not that far, from us today. Yeah, I'll add, more later on.
Thank you very much, Nico. And now Barış Aksoy from Intel Capital with us. Intel Capital is a really big investor. Please correct me if I'm wrong, has been active in this space since 1991 with over, according to numbers I have, $10.8 billion in 1,250 companies in 54 countries. So a truly global VC investor. And the Turkey office has been recently opened in summer 2012, and you're spending a lot of time in Turkey, and already before that made some investments in Turkey, and hopefully we'll be making some more investments. And could you please help us understand more about your views on the Turkish internet market?
Yeah, sure. And thanks again. I mean, you did your homework, I guess. Intel Capital is one of the largest technology investors in the world, and we've been investing heavily into technology around the world since '91, $10 billion plus, and we hit that mark last year. A very important landmark point for us in our investing history. And I think about to close our investment in a 55th country. A lot of interesting innovation going all around the world, where it used to be focused into Western Europe, US, and other emerging countries. Now, with the democratization of the internet, with the LAMP stack and a bunch of other technologies, now anyone, anywhere, a brilliant entrepreneur in China, in Turkey, in Ankara, can build global platforms. I mean, obviously there are challenges, it's not as easy. The problems shift to other parts of the stack in the value chain, but there's great opportunity for an entrepreneur with a great idea and passion to build very impressive companies. So we are truly a stage agnostic investor. Someone else has mentioned, I think you need to be one of those to be able to play in this market in this time of the venture capital era. It's we invest a couple $100,000 all the way up to as outliers, $2 billion. We closed a $3 billion plus investment last year. And we also closed a $250,000 investment into a small internet company. So it has its own challenges, but we need to have that kind of a machine to be able to invest into anywhere in the world, any stage, and any segment of technology. So we invest in broad areas within the technology segment. I think Nico mentioned the similar areas, like we go all the way from internet to semiconductor to telecom, healthcare, energy, IT, education technologies, and we recently announced a fund to support the innovation around the connected car. And as Intel and Intel Capital, we see cars, the automotive industry, as one of the new emerging platforms for us. I mean, we went from PC, mobile, tablet. We look into TV. There's a lot of innovation around TV, just not from the hardware perspective, but from the experience perspective. And also now a lot of interesting technologies around the cars, from infotainment to electromechanical systems and things like that. So we are very excited about that. And why we opened up an office in Turkey last year is driven with a lot of tailwind by all of you guys know about the very attractive demography, right time of the market, in the sense that a lot of those young, tech-savvy students, engineers are now moving into and tasting and hearing about the opportunities of entrepreneurship, and then moving into and then trying either themselves or by joining to a startup. So it is the beginning of the overall VC, overall entrepreneurship ecosystem, but I think it's moving the right direction. There's a lot of opportunities in that sense, a lot of upside. I guess we're going to talk about it. And yeah, so that's why we started it. Started the office. We are covering Turkey, Middle East, and North Africa investments out of here, and very excited to meet entrepreneurs here. And this is my first time at Startup Turkey, and I want to mention that. So I met Burak, I think, in 2008, 2009, and I was impressed by his passion then, and I always thought, like, wow, this guy is super excited about building an entrepreneurial ecosystem in Turkey, and I thought it will die down. But I see Burak today, and he still have the same passion and the same energy and same drive to build and grow this. I mean, I bet he's a very emotional point for him, like looking at the room, like there's 600 people here, and half of them founders. I mean, this is amazing. So congratulations, and I'm glad to be here.
Just continue maybe on that point. I mean, we have the passion, drive, entrepreneurs, we have the demographics. What are we missing? And also, maybe related to that question, since you have opened a Turkey office, is there a specific allocation for Turkey? Do you have to invest a certain amount of money in Turkey, or is it just as an opportunity basis, diversified over the years as a vintage?
From our side, I mean, venture, I guess everyone is going to agree with that, is not a scalable business. I mean, it's limited by the partners and the investors. And so we are very excited about the region, not only Turkey, Middle East, North Africa, too. It's a very underinvested, very young and tech-savvy population. There's a lot of different, trends that is all in favor of technology entrepreneurship. And the ecosystem is emerging. So ecosystem in the sense that not only entrepreneurs, but the intermediaries, banks, the legal infrastructure, the lawyers, and mentors. And we've been recently talking to someone over Twitter, and one of the things I just said was that the more I think about it, I think it makes more sense to me. We probably need 500x more mentors. I mean, we need 50x more angels, and we need probably 5x more VCs. So, and it's VCs usually operate in a competition kind of an environment where we compete for the same deals, but we need each other too. And in Turkey, I think this is more cooperation than competition at this stage, because we need a lot of, we need more wallets around the table, because there's a growing, look at the room, there's a lot of, half of the room is founders, and probably a lot of them are in Istanbul and Izmir and Ankara and building up. So it's, we need more investors around the table. And without that, it's really tough for us to push on the gas to put more capital in work, because it's not scalable, so we need more people around. Regardless, we are very excited. We want to do more deals. That's the reason I moved 6 months ago. So just to give you a kind of maybe a similar analogy, we did that in Latin America a couple of years ago in Brazil, and one of the upcoming entrepreneurial ecosystems from the technology and many other, I think, sectors perspective. Now we have 4 people there. It's one of our most active region. We invest heavily in Brazil, from broadband to infrastructure, enterprise, consumer internet, education, and then we're going to do the same probably here. And it all depends on how this ecosystem will evolve. How are we going to attract more investors into Turkey? How are we going to develop the intermediaries, from accountants to lawyers to government? I mean, there was a panel before me kind of talking about to regulations around angel investment. These are all going to be needed, and it's all moving to the right direction. I mean, it will take time, but it's all moving to the right direction. To your question, in a short answer, we'll be very excited, and we want to do as many as possible. And I can't give you any number, but we have very attractive opportunities on our pipeline. In fact, one of them going to our committee next week in a very attractive segment. I mean, we're very excited about what's coming up in Turkey.
Yeah, it's very good to hear an institutional investor like Intel Capital is here in Turkey for the long run. But there are some others, like Rocket Internet, for example, came in and invested a lot, but then suddenly left. So it gives very frustrating, I think, messages to especially global investors. But maybe I can switch to Rupesh in this sense. I don't know if I can make the comment as a new, as a veteran investor in the VC, but new to Turkey. What are your views on what are we missing in Turkey, and where are we going? You think?
I mean, I would echo a lot of the comments made earlier. You need more of everything. You know, I did a quick check. I'm sorry because I don't remember numbers very well off the top of my head, but I did a quick check before coming on the panel on AngelList, and on AngelList there was 162 startups listed in Turkey. And that compares to 1,850 in the UK, right? And 900 investors compared to about 2,800 in the UK, right? So there's more of everything needed. More of this kind of creative, destructive force that you have in startups needs to happen. More berserk ideas rather than clones. You know, incentives from the government for people to become angel investors. I think all these things help build the ecosystem and help you know, raise the tides, or raise all ships, and you need a big success story. I think that would also really help. You know, I'm hopeful that some of the larger tech companies today will get to that next level where they can either IPO, or there's a big transaction, a $1 billion type transaction, where everyone will just turn their heads and say, "Wow, if they could do it, you know, I can do it too." So I think there is more to be done. Of course, we think it's happening. We think it's interesting, and we like to be part of that. So we are finding some very good teams that we're going to back. It's risky, it's venture, but we think they're good teams, and they deserve the chance to try to make it to the next level. But yeah, no, I think more of everything. You know, more people need to get involved. More people need to start companies. More failures, more successes. It all kind of adds to it happening.
And just to complete the circle in that, you mentioned 100 million euros of funds available for the VC team. And how big are the investments you're making through this available funds?
It's mixed. So the smallest check we'll write is about €1 million, and that's the 2 investments we're looking at very actively right now in Turkey are about in that range.
Early stage?
They are what I would call early stage, yeah.
Okay.
So it's about that size checks we're writing here, whereas in Russia we're writing much bigger checks because the companies are further along, they need more capital, it's a bigger market. So you know the minimum is probably $1 million that we could write.
Okay, thank you very much. And just moving right from that point, and continuing discussion with what are we missing? I mean, maybe we miss some very big success stories, local champions. We have some of them, but I don't think we have a $1 billion company yet. We have several $100 million companies. Some of their entrepreneurs, founders are in the room. And in that sense, maybe regulation-wise, there are, as we have seen in the panel before us, the government is doing, I think someone mentioned 1% of the GDP to be made available for funding entrepreneurs and all these startups in Turkey. But the ecosystem is not full. Maybe it's because we don't have as developed capital markets. We don't have a NASDAQ, and the Turkish companies are not big enough to. Because I think I heard the number somewhere. If any company has below $50 million revenues, investment banks won't touch it and won't take it to UK or US markets for IPOs. So that shuts the door for more funding available for Turkish companies. But maybe Yüksel can help us with the 10-year past invested in some big Turkish ventures. And how do you see this missing elements?
First of all, I agree with Rupesh's comments that we need more of all. And looking back to the 13-year history of INAP, what I can comment from my observation is that in our early days, we had to be committed to each investment in the follow-up rounds for at least 2-3 rounds. To Barış's comment, if you look at it, in early 2000, ILAB was probably the only one or only second early stage investor in the market. When we did an early round investment, there was in the short run nowhere to be seen a second round investor or a third round investor. So any investor that has planned a commitment into an investment had to make sure that he's going to be there for the portfolio company in the following rounds, and had to make sure that his commitment is going to stay for there. But now, if I look to the market, I can confidently see that people from the local market are looking extensively more into internet assets in early stage investments. So if I'm approached by an early stage investment, I can confidently assess that in the following rounds, I will see that I can partner with some other investors. We have EBRD, we have Intel Capital, we have 212, and in the later stage rounds, even more, we see a lot of global late stage investors looking into the market. So what we can say is that the market is getting a bit more crowded, not in a competitive sense, but in a sense that it allows for the early stage investors to take more risks and to take more positions into early stage companies. And also in the angel investment community, I think that's a very critical ingredient as well. In the past, we needed to move into very early stage categories as much as to startup companies on our own. So in some of our portfolio companies, INAP has been the entrepreneur, such as Sigortamnet, Kemorbis or Stilorbis. ILAB has become the entrepreneur itself, because in those early days in 2000 and 2001, we haven't been approached with entrepreneurs sufficiently. We didn't have the sufficient deal flow to invest in those businesses. But nowadays, I feel like I have to review over 200 companies per year and have an enormous team available to process this pipeline. So I think we're getting more and more all of it, both in the entrepreneur side and also in the investment side. There are still some loopholes in the investment stages. Perhaps the death valley of our investment process is a bit steeper than it is in Europe or in the US, but I think we're getting there. And I think in terms of this public market, I think it is safe to say that NASDAQ is unique to itself. Even in UK, we're struggling with the alternative investment market AIM. So I think Turkey will have to endure significantly more time to have its public markets available for venture capital exits.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think most of the people in this room would agree with that. But we are still I think, on the road to become, I think, having a big ecosystem that works with everything in it in terms of infrastructure, whether it is accountants or lawyers that are experienced in looking at technology companies, venture capital deal making, or whether it's investment bankers or a capital market that is functioning, as well as angel investor networks, because I just looked at some numbers. I think we are coming within the, which we might call developed countries in this sense, at the last in terms of the angel networks. And talking about this whole ecosystem, getting from one point to another, maybe Cem can help us understand, because you've been in this ecosystem for over maybe, I don't know, 20 years, and from the beginnings. How do you perceive this within the past 20 years? How long we are from a point where we can talk about a well-developed and established structure with everybody easily finding funding for their ideas, and then startups getting commercialized and getting big stories, becoming big stories?
Certainly. Let me start with an example. Actually, there's a very interesting example, eye-catching example for me. There's Ahmet Hakan, a well-known columnist. You like him or not, he has got a great audience. He's writing at one of the leading newspapers, as you know, Hürriyet. In the Twitter ecosystem, Ahmet Hakan has got, as of today, like 575,000 followers. There's another girl over there, no one knew her recently, called Pukka. She's got 585,000 followers over there. And she don't have any column or something like that. But she has got a huge community over there. So something is changing actually. Some people that we didn't know are becoming celebrities of today. So it's a paradigm shift. And this social media and the internet, the interest towards internet, it's all triggering that. That's one thing. So I want to emphasize on a little bit the ingredients on the table. Yes, as Turkey, we do have the required ingredients today. Let me give you some figures. Rupesh may not like figures, but I'll give some figures. Turkey, as of today, is the 13th most attractive investment destination for foreign direct investment. That's one thing. These are official figures. It's the 18th largest economy with 780,000 GDP, 780,000 billion dollars GDP, to be specific. We've got 51 million people holding credit cards. We've got 39 million internet users as of today, or maybe a little bit more than that. And half of the society, which is 75 million altogether, is below the age of 29. So we are talking about a huge consumer platform over here. If you know to reach, if you find ways to reach to their pockets, to convince them into consuming through the net or through other medias, yes, you've got a business in your hands, actually. That's one thing. And talking about investment ecosystem, we do have the ingredients over there as well, starting from incubation centers. We do have incubation centers like Özyeğin University is doing so fine over there. We do have, early stage investors like institutional investors, just like Inventram, which is really putting its money into higher technologies with higher entry barriers. I'm talking about automotive technologies. I'm talking about electronic embedded systems. I'm talking about biotechnology, exactly. Or we do have, in that domain, we do have angel investors. I'm part of them as well. I'm part of the leading angel investor group of Turkey, which is Galata Business Angels, the largest institutional angel investor group with 28 members, so far invested more than $2 million, a little bit more than $2 million into 9 different projects, 9 different internet projects, internet technology projects, e-commerce, gaming, social media, you name it. And we are screening many others right now. We do have VCs. We do have local VCs like 212. We do have global VCs, huge global VCs who has really strong interest towards this country. And we do have private equities. If you reach to that stage, yes, we do have private equities as well. So we do have almost all the ingredients, starting from $50,000 ticket size all the way up to couple $1 million, couple $10 million ticket size. Again, if you have an idea, if you have the execution around it, if you have the team, and if you get the mentorship of managing your financials, managing your legals, and of course, the least but the most important, managing your customer and sales process, yes, you do have all the resources right now available in Turkey. Because I mean, this country has now tax exemptions. This country has now incentives by the government. So I mean, I don't see any ingredients missing in this picture. The only ingredient maybe missing in this picture is creativity, to be honest with you. I mean, just in the internet domain, so far, unfortunately, I've been seeing hundreds of copycats becoming candidates for these angel investors, becoming as startup candidates for these institutional investors. So we do need more creative, more distinguished projects coming from yourselves. Other than that, we do have passion, we do have the youth, and we do have a new young generation, almost 490,000 graduating every year from 170 universities of Turkey, if I do memorize the numbers right. And most of them are not just holding their CVs up and just knocking on the doors of these large corporations. Most of them are passionate and eager enough to start their own startups. But they need to be more creative. Other than creating these copycats. That's all I can say about it.
Can I add something to that? I'm glad Jem spiced it up a little bit. So it's, I agree with a lot of the things, but I don't agree on certain parts of it. It's, there is a lot of things available in Turkey. That's why we are excited. That's why I think a lot of people are flying over. I mean, Nico flew over from San Francisco, right? Rupesh from London. I mean, VCs are really busy. There are opportunities everywhere. And having them here is a great sign that there are opportunities here. I mean, there is the macro numbers, as Jem mentioned, which look super sexy. Wow. But then you go one level down. I mean, let's start with advertising. It's, we have around, I was just asking to one of the agencies, I'm not sure if, I bet there are people here from the agencies too. The market, the digital advertising market in Turkey today is around $500 to $600 million. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you just put that into context. US is $37 billion. And you're talking about GDPs. Yes, we are 18th country in from the GDP perspective. So US has 15, 16x larger GDP, but 40x larger advertising market, digital advertising market. So there is a disconnect. And that disconnect is everywhere, from e-commerce. Yeah, we have like how many million credit cards? 50?
51.
Right? It's amazing. But when you look at the e-commerce penetration, the top line is nowhere to represent that kind of penetration. Same with the internet guy. I mean, 34 million internet people is a lot of people, but it doesn't show itself in the advertising market. It doesn't show itself in the enterprise software, in gaming, and a bunch of other areas. So I think, I mean, the biggest problem that I see so far is really the key ingredients that makes a business, which is building the organization, scaling up with an amazing vision, and executing flawlessly. I mean, this is such a boring, I think, concept, but it is what as far as we look at it, as far as I look at it, this is what I see is missing. You have amazing entrepreneurs coming out with, or I mean, even looking at the ideas in US and bringing to Turkey. There's nothing wrong about that. But what is missing is they don't know how to scale a company. They don't have large vision. They don't, I mean, there are a lot of there are a lot of entrepreneurs in the traditional sectors building, car, automotive, manufacturing, and things like that. These guys are now, attracting, I think, around 75 private equity firms around Turkey. They are going around Turkey as like, a kid in a candy shop, because amazing companies, maybe the prices are higher, there may be some problems there, but there are amazing opportunities for private equity. But it took a long time to bring that traditional sector to there. So now we have $50, $100 million, or you have Pegasus, Simit Sarai is now like the biggest topic in the private equity area, private equity land. But in internet, we don't have people, we don't have maybe that's where we are not articulating well, but we don't have the ecosystem or infrastructure to build those large companies like Marcafoni, Trendyol or Hepsiburada. There are only 3 of them or 4 of them, Gitti Gidiyor and things like that, Yemek Sepeti. We need more of that in terms of not maybe the VC money, not maybe the technology or creativity, but really the boring execution of an amazing organization and business. And that part, I think we have it, but it's not shifting from the comfortable jobs that they have at Turkcell or Koç to go and build those companies. It's a hard work. It's not 9 to 5. I mean, you work a long hours. There's a lot of failure behind it, but it's huge. I mean, it gives huge reward.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I would like to ask Nico on this. Do you agree with this that, I mean, Turkey is very strong in e-commerce, social media, content provision. Most of them may be copycats, just providing some services that has been done elsewhere in Turkey. Are you here for these kind of opportunities, or are you looking for original ideas that can grow beyond Turkey and become the next billion-dollar company?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that question. It makes sense actually to have a lot of copycats here because the market is big enough and you can get off the ground. If you're especially a first-time founder who was educated in the US or has been an avid user of all these technologies, you can bring them home and you can potentially have a meaningful exit in a very short period of time. That said, it's not going to be, a billion-dollar company. It's unlikely. It's really, really unlikely. Unless, as Boris mentioned, everybody starts, using their credit card online in the e-commerce space, and they buy pretty much 20–30% of their budget, family home, budget, making transactions online. So, in terms of like copycats and Me Too type of products, these are interesting, but not super, super interesting because Turkey is a big enough market, but not the huge one like China, India, potentially Brazil. So entrepreneurs over here, they're super creative, they're passionate, and I believe now it's a time, since the ecosystem has started compounding at a faster rate, to really look deep into themselves and create a global company from day one. And this is something that will grab the attention of any person interested in investing in something unique that we haven't heard before. Frankly, I don't think that entrepreneurship or starting a company has to do with somebody being from the US, graduating from Stanford, or being part of one of these huge ecosystems. It really depends on whether you can build something that people really want. That's how you get started. And then I understand that there are a lot of the missing elements, as they were mentioned before, at an ecosystem basis. But over time, all this is going to take care of itself. Silicon Valley took us 30–40 years to get there. And the valley grows through a series of booms and busts. Over here, indeed, there are a lot of mentors that are missing. We haven't seen tons of role models who have essentially demystified the process of building these billion-dollar companies, that you can go and talk to them and say, yeah, this guy seems smart, but he's not, 10x smarter than me. Perhaps, he got lucky, or there is a lot that I can learn from. This is an area for sure that there are some missing bodies. But also, events like this help create awareness about the Turkish ecosystem to a broader audience. We need more of that. People on the ground should be connected to each other very, very closely. If you look into other ecosystems like Silicon Valley, Boston, London, there are 30,000 people in Silicon Valley that matter. More or less, they know each other. Same in Boston, same in London. Here, the numbers are much, much smaller. You guys, talking to each other every day. Do you know how to get help from each other? This is the core element of leading, to the creation of huge, huge companies. And thirdly, beyond creating awareness and connecting, the people, it's about these, role models that I mentioned before. Who are these guys? And you're fortunate to have a lot of younger entrepreneurs who are now building companies in the US. So the flows of talent, we can focus either on talent that comes out of Turkey
and builds companies over here from day one. But you're fortunate to have some people who've gone through YC, who've got funding from top VC firms, and some of them are here in the room, who are in Silicon Valley building great companies. So if you can get them, to come over here once in a while and talking to this audience, this would be, terrific.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to all our panelists. Just maybe to briefly wrap up, in terms of what we're missing, Barış mentioned that 50 to 75 private equity funds, as far as I know, they have around $3 billion of committed funds to invest in Turkey in the next 4 to 5 years. But when we look at the VC and seed stage, we have only, I think, 2 or 3 resident funds and 3, 4 more VC funds that are coming from abroad to look for opportunities in Turkey. So it's a lot less in the angel investment networks. As far as I know, there are only 3 of them that has institutionalized themselves. And we need a lot more of these alongside the ecosystem in terms of its infrastructure, building it up. And as mentioned by Nico, Silicon Valley was not built in 2 years, but here in Turkey, as we all know, we like to do things in a faster manner, and we'd like to achieve the targets that we like in a few years, but it doesn't happen, unfortunately, like that. We have to, I think, give it some time and let all these investors and others to come in with their know-how and bring some more maybe institutionalization to have that $1 billion company and entrepreneurs with a global mind. I just saw this morning the unemployment figures, and the youth unemployment, I think, is 18.8% in this country. So we have 500,000 university graduates every year, and not all of them probably employed. I think entrepreneurship and setting up your own companies is a big opportunity for them, but we need the more experienced and professional entrepreneurs, that's for sure, who can do the boring stuff of execution and bringing companies to a more institutionalized, professional and global level, probably. So I don't know if we have more time for some questions. I'm looking to Alan, but so maybe we can ask our questions on one-on-ones during networking time to our panelists. Well, thank you very much for listening to us, and thank you for our panelists.